Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, an inspired conversation space between Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner on the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness.
We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory. We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively, head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper. And for all live-streamed pre-release podcasts and all our free content, head over to our free Facebook group, Nourishing the Mother with Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is allowing space for your humanness in any big life change. So where we'll be centering this conversation is what my experience post-surgery has been, and what the where we want to take it is dividing it into two sections. Whenever we're going through any big life change, aka a rite of passage, what we have is the part that we can prepare for and the part that inevitably our humanness and potentially our soul will co-create, where we need to surrender. So we're going to talk about please be active, and also how do we let go.
Yeah, beautiful. So it's going to be a really lovely distilled down of those really two key parts of any big life change, that is coming, right? So you're preparing for the letting go and the transformation. And so what do you need for that? And then how do you move through and surrender to what comes on the other side?
Correct. So obviously my experience of my current big life change will be my vaginal prolapse, pelvic repair, and hysterectomy surgery. But insert that for anything you're going through. A new baby, change of house, change of career, major crisis in your life, death, all of the things that create huge shift and change in your life are inevitably a call of rite of passage, which means your sense of self, your identity, and your world and life as you know it are about to change. And you've got some reconciliation to do with that. So we can create a process around ourselves that enables us to move through that with as greater ease as is possible, and with as greater support and holding and processing for that transformation, so that it is as complete on the other side, rather than you feeling like you're stuck between two worlds, or you're just wishing you could get back.
Yeah. And really, through a process like this, what makes rite of passage often so difficult is the way that our brain typically responds to what's being asked of us in a rite of passage, in a letting go, in moving into the unknown. And so what this process of this podcast and what we're talking through really helps establish that safety that says, yeah, okay, so these are the things that are necessary, that are required of you to even come to a place of acceptance of what's being asked of you.
Totally.
And sometimes the fear before we before we go into a process like this is how we're going to deal with it on the other side.
Yeah, 100%. Any rite of passage will have three key factors to it. So you're going to have the rite of separation, where it's full of fear. You don't want, it's like, being kicked out, the baby bird being kicked out of the nest. You don't want to leave home.
Yeah.
You know home, you like home, you know your identity, you like your identity, you know your life, you're safe there in that life. And now you can't have it anymore. You're kicked out of home. Well, shit, that's scary.
Yeah.
So, rite of separation, you have enormous fear. All of your mother wound stuff is going to come up. And then you're going to have a rite of transition, which is that numb phase in the middle. I call it like going into the black cave, where you're like, who the fuck am I and what the fuck is going on?
And this is when the reflex is, I've got to get out of here. I need safety. Somebody save me.
It's the black liminal phase, right? You've left the nest. You're no longer who you were, but you have no fucking idea about who you're going to be or what the world looks like or how you walk in a world you know nothing about on the other side. Right? So huge amounts can be grief, can be isolation, feelings of numbness. And then we have the rite of incorporation, which is once we're through the other side of that big transition, how do we incorporate this new identity? How do we walk as it, with it, in an embodied, wholehearted, opened, alive way that expands our life and our experience? So any rite of passage will have these three key transitions, and you will see these same emotional and psychological phases that people go through. Now, we can either move through those in a way that is constructive or a way that is destructive. So I love rites of passage for the simple perspective that it makes the unknowable seen. And so it allows your psyche to reconcile in alignment with the life that you want to lead and how you want to lead yourself through it.
Yeah.
And it creates a huge amount of spaciousness for you to become rather than trying to cling on to who you've been.
And it's that clinging on that takes you out of the present and your ability to actually process what's going on and allow yourself to step into who you're becoming.
Exactly. When these are incomplete cycles, when we have not actually had the space or allowed ourselves to move through this, is when we will have the greatest problem in the rite of incorporation. We may never get there, where we cannot walk as it feels like an uncomfortable skin. We don't feel like we belong in this world. We shouldn't be walking this life. I hate motherhood. I hate my body. I hate whatever, my partner, marriage. You can't get comfy in your world as it has shifted around you.
Yeah, and you're almost like that, snarling like dog at the fence, like wanting to get out because you're hurt and you're unsafe and you don't know where to go, but you don't want to be here. And that's a classic thing of motherhood, right? Is this sense of the walls closing in and this longing for a different identity.
Yes. That
really just speaks to the unintegrated rite of passage, the unintegrated transition.
Exactly. So when I say rite of passage, I'm so love that we anchored that in, because it often doesn't mean a lot to people until you really understand from a deeply spiritual and ancestral perspective how just paramount this is to the experience of a human walking with a soul. So I hold rites of passage and transitions of huge change in anybody's life with that level of reverence. I create ceremony around everything because that's how I lead myself through my life. So if you're going through a period of change, I'm going to tell you, you need to ceremony that.
Yeah, that needs a ceremony.
That is a ceremony. You need to, help yourself through that situation. You can do that so gracefully and with so much ease. So as we know, and go back to the podcast on the debrief of my hysterectomy party, for the first time in my life, I did this rite of passage in a completely different way. So I used the skill of humor and nonsense play in order to move myself through this process, which I've never done before. I've only used the experiences of meeting fear and grief and heartbreak and reconciliation. I've used that skill set of depth and holding and releasing. This time I did it in a completely different way. And I would argue it was potentially more skillful than the pieces of me that could hold the grief. Because it was artful in the way that I think this is why comedians are so genius at what they do, because they have worked out this beautiful way to like ping that string of fear or tension and let everybody laugh, and therefore AKA ripple it energetically through their bodies and psyches to a point where they can reconcile it.
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
It's
I love
genius.
That. And it is, I think, often an overlooked way of processing things, because it can easily be seen as like trivial or not taking it, not looking at it with the reverence it needs or the seriousness that it needs, but it can actually be incredibly liberating.
Yeah.
As we talked about in that podcast.
Yes.
It made it accessible to far more women.
Yes, exactly. And therefore made my circle of support afterwards wider, which is also the genius part of it. Because when you do a rite of passage and you involve your community with it, it's also not just you going through that experience. It's also those other women who are part of your new identity being walked through their own reconciliation of how you will change and how your life will change and how your relationship will change, even if it's for short-term healing.
Yeah.
So it's beautiful. So let's just talk about what you can prepare for. So number one, obviously, is create a fucking ceremony around it.
Yeah.
And that can look like the depth and the mother holding and the grief. If that's what you need, it can 100% look like that. I have a whole course dedicated to that called Sanctum. But if what you need is a place of play to use humor with skill and nuance, then that's when you're looking at doing some sort of outrageous celebratory party. So that's where you'll find all of my blogs on my processing for everything we'll talk about in here. And also you can instantly download my entire kit for how I created my rite of passage hysterectomy party. So I detail it all, specifically view all the templates, all the downloads, all of the links to everything that I used and purchased. And you can get that at julietenner.love/hysterectomy. But the point is, do yourself a favor, girlfriend. Don't make it hard. You want it easy. You just have to click download. Give yourself a ceremony, a party, a space and a place for transformation. Let that just be easeful. It doesn't need to be hard or big or nobody wants to go to it or how will I even? I'm making it super fucking easy for you. There's no excuses.
I freaking love it. We're getting a talking to, and I love it.
So please prepare your psyche.
Otherwise, you spin your wheels and it shows up in the event.
Right. Exactly.
In the birth.
Exactly. Oh, you can. Yes, right. So I have an ebook on mother blessings. If you want to do a mother blessing to transition, like, please fucking go to my website and use that shit. There's no reason you can't. I'm making it easy for you. It's all
Julie does. Julie does. I've had a few mother blessings held by Julie, and she does a beautiful job. And the structure is everything. And I think too, what leaves so many women floundering in this question of, how am I going to get through this, is not having a structure or knowing how to lead themselves through it. And you do that so beautifully. Those guides include that so beautifully.
Thank you. And also just because I want you to do it. I want you to have this. I want this in your life. I want you to process. I mean, the more women that we have processing their evolutions of transition and change into greater empowerment, the better this world will be.
Yes.
So how about we just fucking do that?
I love it.
So hold yourself a rite of passage, girlfriend. Go do a ceremony or a party that feels in alignment with exactly what your psyche needs to reconcile who you be on the other side of this change. Number two is, I just want to talk about, before we even get to that, is active healthcare. I do want you to take autonomy in your healthcare. I do think part of my journey of being able to get here to being so ready to meet this change was knowing that I felt empowered and had consciously moved through what I perceived came up for me and I could do beforehand. So that meant before I bypassed my vaginal prolapse and got rid of it, it meant being with it. It meant touching it, looking at it, being with my partner, with my legs open, having him gaze at it, like working myself consciously through all of my edges of shrink and fear and vulnerability and shame until I could get to the other side of loving my prolapse as it was. Now, I had half a vagina hanging out of me. My cervix was at the entrance of my vagina. So I had a G-spot that was out. I had, it didn't look like a pretty vagina. I have this, hymen tag that would hang out like a tongue that since my first birth. I don't have a beautiful looking vagina, in inverted commas.
Yeah.
Culturally so. But I think part of the process of being ready to move on was I could choose to stay here like this and that would be okay. I'm not trying to have surgery to get rid of this thing so I don't have to feel it or deal with it anymore.
You're loving it as it is.
As it is, I can be here. I have worked through, because the point of the dance is never to get to the other side of the dance floor. The point of the dance is to enjoy the fucking dance.
Be in the process.
Right. Walking the path of joy on your life as you lead yourself through it is not to get to a destination. It's to walk the fucking path of joy.
Yeah.
And every offshoot that you see, you know, that wildflower on the road and that, you know, like you walk the path holding as much joy and embracing of the walking as you can, right? The man who, like the parable, the man who enjoys the walk will walk further than the man who enjoys the destination.
Yeah. Oh, I love that parable.
So the point is never to get to the other side. The point is always to meet yourself where you're at. And I do think part of the healing process is, okay, whatever my physical body is revealing to me, wherever I am shrinking, is feedback to me. So instead of believing the shrink, or instead of trying to bypass the shrink because the shrink will just appear in another area of my life because it's there for me to deal with something.
Yeah.
How about I just use this opportunity to move through my shrink and find a way to expand here so it's no longer an inhibitor to my life. So,
and if you as a listener are wondering how to relate, you know, this question of, you know, active healthcare and looking at this stuff and supporting yourself the way that you would love to be supported, I really invite you to go back to our podcast archives to 2019, where we did a few episodes, I think, around the choices I was making in my birth with my third child, where, you know, because my husband really wasn't that keen on being in the birth space, I really prioritized what is all of the care that I know that I need, what are all of the ways that I would love to be supported, and what do I need to walk myself through to be worthy of that support, and to prioritize the healing that needs to happen for me to have the outcome that I know I say I want. Because whatever's unhealed shows up.
Yeah, totally. So, you know, please just look for and get curious about the places that whatever change or transition you or your body are going through is simply to ask, where am I shrinking? And how can I create experiences for myself so that I may move through the shrink, which is an old story, an old programming asking to be removed so that I no longer have this glass ceiling. How do I help myself move through this in a really supported way so that I can expand? So that for me was really, with a vaginal prolapse, was really prioritizing that I could still be sexually sovereign and sexually alive and still have incredible orgasms, which I did. So I do really want to have a very clear voice here that your pelvic, in inverted commas, dysfunction or your vaginal prolapse is not the reason you're not having outrageous orgasms or incredible empowered sex. It's not the reason.
Yeah. And I think this is a good point to labour, because a little bit like our podcast last week, which we didn't quite get around to talking about, but how is the excuse a way to not deal with what's really missing for you?
Yeah.
Right. So I have a reason why I can't feel more pleasure here. It's because of this.
Yeah.
Or, you know, in our last week's podcast, you know, I have a reason why I'm getting so triggered with my child at Christmas because of this.
Yeah. Totally.
Don't let that be where you stop.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't let it be where you stop. So I would love for you to look at, where am I shrinking? How can I expand? I would love for you to look at, like Bridget did with her birth, what do I need and who can I call around me? What experiences, practitioners, help and support do I need? Path can I begin to take one step on, one at a time, so that I can just meet this next healing and this next bit as I walk this journey, as I do the dance. It's not about getting to the other side of the dance floor, but how do I help myself heal on this path? And then I'll know when I'm ready for surgery or for whatever that next birth, whatever that next thing is. So being really active in your healthcare means not stopping at the one person you've been referred to if they're not a perfect match for you. It means to keep asking. It means to keep questioning. It means to keep opening up conversations, because I think in every single part of this step, and probably in every area of my life, it is the voices of women that will help me find who I need. Women are phenomenal at sharing.
And storytelling in a way that like hits you in your heart, so you get to see what might be possible for you as well.
Yeah. And just like knowing, oh, well, you know, I did this, or my friend did that, or how about this? Like the women around you, I promise you, like the universe delivers everything that you need for your next evolution. The women around you will have the answers you need. You just have to ask the question. You go first, the universe responds. So by having conversations, you will find the answers, and you're not alone. Right. So much of this process, you will meet areas of isolation. I'm so alone. I'm the only one having this experience. I'm the only one doing this really hard thing. But there is as much love there as you want if you're willing to access it. So have the conversation, open up the fucking question. Just openly say, here's where I'm at. Because the more we box our experience in darkness and shame, the more alone we will feel, and the smaller our world will get. So please open up, ask questions, have conversations, be willing to be on an evolving journey that doesn't look like a singular destination, but looks like I just meet myself at each step. I find the people in alignment to me. I listen when my body feels stingy or judged. I listen to why, and I ask myself a little deeper, okay, what is here? You know, what is here? So setting yourself up is, have I really walked myself on an active healthcare journey that involves my emotionality, my glass ceilings, and my physical healthcare and support? For me, that's what it looks like. Have I done that? Have I walked myself through that? Have I prepared myself, my body, and my emotions as much as I can? Have I allowed myself the space to emotionally release it each time? I think the only reason I could get to this rite of passage and be so fucking ready to laugh and play and call in and celebrate this next woman was because this journey was so slow. And anytime I tried to speed, I noticed my reflex being to speed up. I consciously made myself go slower. So anytime I was like, if I can book the surgery right now, I was like, not booking the surgery until I can do this from a place of complete grounded regulation, and that may take me 3 months. Anytime I wanted to, you know, bypass this feeling, and instead of opening my legs to my partner, close them and say how gross I am, slow it down, go back, be here longer. So notice that the faster you go, the less you feel, and that journeys that are slow. I mean, you know, time is such a funny thing, isn't it? Is we have a perception that time is linear, and that if I go this slow now, that it will go this slow later. But the truth is, time moves in conjunction with where our psyche is at.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's almost like if you take the time to slow it down and walk yourself along that path consciously, then you catch up, or sometimes go past where you, what is it, like the turtle and the, what's that parable?
Turtle and the hare. Yeah.
Turtle and the hare, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What you get to integrate of yourself on the way through that slower process often makes you more whole and capable to be at the end.
Right. Exactly. So slow down and just walk yourself with compassion, because often it's with each new piece of information or that one practitioner who brought that one piece of consciousness forward for you, that you get to have your own little process of grief or surrender or emotional release around, that in the end, you don't need one huge week-long wallow, but you're doing in all of these small, tiny ways because you're consciously willing to meet yourself at each one of those steps. Because every person that comes into this journey with you will have one piece of consciousness for you. You don't need to find one practitioner who can fucking heal you. It's probably unlikely. But you will find several, and friends and whoever strangers along the way who just have that one next point of consciousness. Ping, here you go. Ping, here you go. And you will only ever get what you're able to deal with. So let yourself grieve in small ways. Like, oh my God, like, I really loved this reflection from Nick because, I mean, I've said this before, but I was just like, as I was getting to the end, and I'm like, I don't really feel this intense grief that everyone talks about with hysterectomy and with, losing something of your body or having it cut out of your body. I don't feel this intense grief. Like, am I supposed to be feeling this? What is wrong with me? And realizing that this journey has been stretched out over 6 years. And that there have been every single one of those points, I have grieved and I have cried an ocean and I have quaked and shaked and orgasmed an ocean that opened me to heartbreak. And, over a long period of time. So I've probably gone deeper and wider than I could if I just sat waiting for the grief to catch up with me to a point where it was big enough that I decided now it was worthy to be dealt with or something.
There was almost like a chipping away by being conscious of every...
Yeah, like the pressure cooker. I didn't wait for it to build up and now I need to explode. I just did it at each step. I just juiced that and juiced that and juiced that and juiced that, and along we went. So being able to create celebration and ceremony for yourself to help your psyche process, being really active in your healthcare and walking a path where you resource yourself for the best experience that you can have with practitioners, but also that you're really allowing yourself to meet yourself at each one of those grief stages and each one of those pricks and pins and, fears, the small stuff. So allowing emotional release over a longer period of time. Now let's talk about setup and preparation for the surgery itself and for that period that you're going to be out for, so to speak. So I also put a lot of intention around this. So Bridgie organised, from the women that were at my ceremony, she organised a meal tree, which was amazing. So
how are those meals going? Are they delicious?
Oh, so good. It's so good. Nick and I were just saying last night, and because Bridget and I have done this for so many years, for so many children, we recognise that actually a meal every second day is best, not a meal every day. Because or else you end up with all these leftovers and some days don't go to plan and all of that. But every second day it's enormously helpful.
So good. Yeah.
And Nick and I were just saying, like, he finds it, even if we just removed it being a meal, he's like, it's so good because it actually means the time that I would spend normally doing a meal, I can clean the kitchen, play catch up on the day and do kids' lunch boxes.
Yeah, that's gold. Isn't that just so good?
Isn't that gold?
Yeah.
So doing something like a meal tree, I think, is imperative. And you would be surprised how much, your friends just want to love on you.
And and this is to go back to your point about the community that you invite into your rite of passage by way of, for you, the hysterectomy party, for mothers of new babies, like the mother blessing. The community that you invite in to participate in that transition is then the community that holds you. So for you, like, you had like 20-something women at your hysterectomy party. So that then means we've got a meal train for you for like nearly 6 weeks.
It's incredible.
Like, it's amazing, right?
And I need it. Can I just say I need it?
Yeah, you do need it, especially at the moment.
Yeah, especially at the moment, which we'll get to. So part of my conversation was, how do I do this with my community? How do I invite them in? Because I know also that my strategy is control.
Yeah. So if I feel in chaos, I'll control more. Yeah. If I feel overwhelmed, I'll control more.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll just do more to be more in control of my environment. So because I know that about myself, I actually need, the greatest support that I need is to be told to do nothing over and over and over and over and over again.
And the irony of that is not lost on me, that you have a catheter in.
Right, exactly. You know exactly, which we'll get to in the surrender section. So set yourself up. You've done that by calling in your support and being completely open with them and completely human about, here's what's going on for me. So even though I want this surgery, I'm electing for this surgery, I'm choosing this path, I feel really good in this path, I can feel really good, and I'm asking us as a community to hold both, just like we do at birth. We can be so excited and blessed and loved, and we can hold a huge amount of fear or resentment or pain about the baby, about the experience, about motherhood. Can we not have a space where we can hold both?
Yeah.
So I can choose this surgery and know that it's the best thing for me. And I can still have fear about losing my uterus, about being the type of woman who says, cut it out, about what ramifications and side effects might come from a choice like that, such as incontinence or potentially sexual numbness. One of my biggest fears. So being able to have a space where I could say to this group of women, yeah, this is an empowered choice and I'm really human here. There's this too. It opens compassion and vulnerability for all of the women that surround you. And we only get better as a community when we're more passionate, available and open.
And when you name the thing.
Yeah.
And you feel held in that process and you feel seen in the me too.
Yes. Totally, 100%. So setting up a psychological support group, because all of these women now they're aware of what my fears are. So they specifically afterwards check in with me, how's it going? So beautiful. And they're building this meal tree around me and my family, which allows Nick and I both to do the job of being parents. And well, I really am more I really get to sink into being with my kids.
Without having the anxiety of like, oh gosh, how's dinner going to get on the table tonight? Or is there going to be enough lunchbox snacks or, whatever that is. And I must say, with the meal train, also take lunchbox stuff.
Yeah, totally.
I really see that can be a struggle. I mean, it's a struggle for mothers at the best of times. What the hell am I going to put in the lunchbox? Yes. But especially when you're not, really focus on that area. To also support, maybe it's the new mother who's got older kids and she's not bringing her A game to lunchboxes. So how can you support her with that?
Totally, 100%. So setting yourself up for that, and also other supports. So things like we have a private Facebook group where if Nick and I need a lift or a ride, we can just, Nick or I, because he's been there too, can just pop a thing in there and be like, yo, we need this help. Someone in that group will be able to help me. And also being really open with the communities that my kids are in with sport, just being like, I'm having a hysterectomy, so I'm going to be out for a while. I can't drive. And they're like, yeah, well, gosh, of course, we still have kids that have got to get to rep and sport and running and swimming and I don't even know, gymnastics. So just being open about, yeah, let me do that for you. Amazing. Amazing. So I had a girlfriend last night who picked both my kids up from kinder and school, took them for a play, took them to basketball training last night where another mum on the team ran for me, had them for a sleepover, and then was taking them to the basketball game today and dropping them home after that. Fucking amazing.
That's incredible. Isn't that beautiful? But that also just speaks to putting that value on building that community.
Totally.
Well, which is right back at the start.
It is. You reap the rewards. You do.
Yeah.
What you put into community, you get out of it 100%. I have another mum who picks up my puppy just to take him for a run with her puppy.
I'm so glad that worked out for you, because I walked into Julie's house. It's like 3 days after coming home, 2 days after coming home. And the bloody puppy.
Fucking nightmare.
Well, I mean, I already have like PTSD with puppies, right? Like we've got a puppy in it. He like regularly drives me nuts. And so I'm like, what are you doing about this situation?
And I'm like, I know, because I'm normally the one who takes him for a run.
Yeah. And you can't do that. So he's just running around the house like a
fucking crazy.
Like an absolute nutcase.
Yeah. Like a nutcase. Yes. So I've had this girlfriend who's just picked him up. She's picked him up 3 times this week. Just taken him to a park to have a run with her puppy. He comes back exhausted and all of a sudden he's beautiful again.
So good.
Oh my God. So
he's
good.
Like docile and like yes. I've actually been loving the hot weather because that makes my puppy docile. So you can look forward to that as well.
Oh, good.
It's the hot weather plus, the amazing friend that you can call on to take him to the puppy.
Right. So my point is, like, think about how you can set yourself up afterwards, because there's lots you need help with. Can someone just come vac my floors? Can someone just come clean my kitchen? Can I have a meal? Can I have a puppy play? Can someone take my kids for a sleepover or a play date or a pickup from kinder or school? Like, think wider about what type of supports you're going to need so that you can do nothing.
Yeah.
But heal, which is, of course, paramount. So set yourself up that way. The other conversation that Bridgie and I will briefly mention here is that I was working on the support with my husband. And that didn't go according to my control plan in my head.
He didn't quite step up the way you thought he might with your very prescriptive requirements.
Right. So in my head, I'm like you would want him as a worker because he's dedicated, responsible, never takes sick leave, never takes carer's leave,
he's my husband all over as well. It's like painful.
Whereas I'm looking at it going, you've got carer's leave and sick leave, fucking use it.
Yeah, you got to take like 3 weeks off.
Yeah, so I was saying to him, okay, but in my head, I'm not going to be able to move. And I know what I've done and have done previously in my life is seen that you're working or distracted or there's needs that you're not tuned into just because he's singularly focused and not used to doing the whole kids invisible work thing that I do.
Mm.
And I know I'm going to watch, like you did today in the previous podcast with your kids, I'm going to watch this shit playing out. And my subconscious is going to go, just fix it.
Yeah.
And instead of resting, I know that I will have this drive in me to get up and do it, to fix it, to make it better. Instead of what I need to do is rest and do nothing. So, so we had this whole conversation that turned into an argument that went over a couple of days because he was just unrelenting and he was not taking time off. And I'm saying to him, you have to take time off. Yeah. And he's saying, I can't take time off. There's no way I can take time off before Christmas. And I'm not taking time off. That's way more stressful than taking time off. And I'm looking at him going, and in the end, we were in just this battleground of the same two viewpoints, just hitting each other constantly. And so I had this conversation. I sat down with him at the end and I said, okay, I just want to be exceptionally clear. So there is nothing left to assumption here. And then we're going to come to an agreement. What I hear you saying is, Julie, I can do everything that you do, all of the invisible work that you do every single day, all of the staying on top of the house and the cleaning, all of the running the kids around, all of the meal prep and lunchbox prep and taking Lola to all of her medical appointments and being with a preschooler who's home. You can do all of my job at the same time as working your job with all of your demands. And you will be completely aware of what Gwen needs when she needs it, and that I can't enter this situation without needs, and I need to be able to see you stressed on a work call, demands from a boss, and I still need to be able to say to you, I need these things because I can't do them for myself.
That is such a beautiful spelling out of like the landscape that you were looking at.
And he looked at me and he took this beautiful, this deep breath in, and I watched him just like be the mountain, ground down. And he looked at me and he went, yes, that's what I'm saying. I can do this.
Wow.
And I like had to go, I'm pretty sure, like in my head, I'm like, pretty sure you fucking can't. But okay. Because I had to decide.
Maria.
Yeah, I had to decide in this moment, was I going to continue to mother him and henpeck him and put myself in the role of I know best, better, do it my way, chip away at him, put myself in the masculine? Or was I going to let myself surrender and trust that this king in front of me could up-level his skill set?
I bet that would have been deeply uncomfortable.
It was really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I was a bit fucking pissed off, to be honest. But also hugely aware in my head that I had to consciously for myself, I couldn't run this process of healing well and surrender if I was still trying to control. So I had to decide I was either going to let it go or I was going to take control, because there's nothing worse than saying you let it go but then backseat parenting it.
Yeah, which is exhausting.
Nothing worse. It chips away at self-worth for both of you. So I went, okay, sure. And in my head, I'm thinking, well, I'm still setting myself up because it's still me who's resourcing my community, my girlfriends, the dinners. Like I'm still setting all of that up.
Yeah.
And preparing my nervous system to hold when I watch him drown, because he will. So the only way we up level is when we drown and we have to sink or swim.
And it's like, I actually really love, like, as much as our nervous system hates it, there's a fucking beauty in that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's awful when you're like sinking, but also it's like, what am I going to do here?
Exactly. The only way we actually do more is
like,
that.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. But particularly when we as mothers who are so competent and capable, and this is our life that has been well crafted and developed over many years of practice to up level the skill set that we now currently employ.
Yes.
And we hand that over and expect our partners to pick it up in 24 hours. It's really hard to watch them drown.
Yeah.
And perceptually watch our children drown in the process.
That's, I think, the biggest challenge for mothers in our community is, can I watch that?
Can I watch that and hold myself still in an open-hearted, needful surrender, not needless?
Yeah.
Can I still be sovereign in my needs? So
can I watch you drown and struggle and still say, I really need you to get me a drink of water. I really need you to help me, whatever that is. Yeah. Whatever you're calling out for from the couch.
Yes.
Exactly. And not minimizing.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. This podcast is brought to you by Create Your Own Hysterectomy Party Kit, which is a way for you to celebrate, honour and process hysterectomy and vaginal prolapse surgery with your friends in a hilariously funny and bonding event. So you can grab that kit from julietenner.love/hysterectomy. And Bridge, what have you got going on in the world?
The Christmas Survival Guide. So this is your free guide to get you through December, to help you feel supported, nourished, and like someone's got your back in the overwhelm and chaos that can be the festive season. So hop on there at bridgetwood.life and you'll get weekly emails to support you as you get through this crazy, beautiful, intense time of year.
So actually my biggest struggle was that I was like, I don't know how the fuck this is working. So anyway, then I have my surgery. Now my surgery didn't go according to plan. So it should have been a 2-hour surgery and ended up being a 4-hour surgery. Because what my surgeon didn't know and what I didn't know was that I actually had adenomyosis, which is, instead of endometriosis, when the endometrium grows in the the abdominal cavity, instead of the endometrium growing outside of the uterus, it grows into the uterine muscle. It grows into the uterus walls. And what happens is it continues to expand and grow the uterus and the muscle, because you're just building all of this menstruating tissue within the muscle body itself, which is one of the key symptoms for that. I mean, how I didn't even click, I don't know. But one of the key symptoms for that is a cycle that's 24 days or less. What did I have? Fucking 24-day or less cycle with like really heavy bleeding, where I would be wiped out. I've had iron transfusions. Like, now I'm looking back at it going, oh, that's why your periods were so fucking horrendous.
Yeah, wow.
So what that meant is my uterus actually had grown enormously in size and could not, because the surgery was done vaginally instead of abdominally to save me from the abdominal surgery. My surgeon perceived that to be best practice.
Okay.
Yeah. So she had gone up through the vagina to remove the cervix and the uterus was so big, she couldn't get it back through the vagina.
Wow. So what happened?
Well, so then what they had to do was cut the uterus into 3 sections to be able to pull each one of those sections through the vagina. Right. But the problem with that was, one, that then you've got more bleeding, but 2, because I had what she called an estrogen-rich uterus. So all of these blood vessels, like, it was highly vascularized, had all of these blood vessels coming into this enormous uterus, which meant every time she made a cut, I was bleeding.
Wow.
So the process of removing my uterus was much slower, probably very indicative of the experience I've had anyway, because of how many blood vessels were attached to this uterus. Which I also was like, of course. I mean, it's so healthy and vital. It has so much estrogen in it, which is our female hormone.
Yeah.
Because of my fucking life. It's all woven in there into this.
Oh, yeah. It's like womb centered, like.
Yes.
Know.
So it took them way longer to do this surgery, remove it in 3 pieces. Then when they came to doing the vaginal prolapse repair, what they usually do is they cut, depending whether you've got a front or a back prolapse, I had both, they cut a line in the vagina and they look behind it to see where the fascia is that normally is supportive of what holds back the bowel or the bladder. Like it's the fascia that holds everything in place. And she said my fascia was so shredded, she really couldn't find much. So instead what she did was create like a double wall to reinforce particularly the front where the bladder was, because I wasn't having incontinence surgery this time. Often people do it together. I wasn't. I wanted to see what my body did afterwards before I made that decision. So she then had to double wall the front, repair the back prolapse. And by the time, so she's moving downwards through my body from my uterus to my cervix to my vagina. By the time she'd done that, she said the problem was that was all reinforced. And then we noticed, if you imagine you've got like a tower, which is like your vagina, and at the bottom, what you want is a perineum and a pelvic floor that matches that shape so that you've got a foundation of strength. But the problem was my perineal muscles, so the muscles between my anus and vagina, were so stretched, which made the mouth of my vagina wider, that it meant there wasn't foundations. Like you have a tighter tube, I suppose, that has nothing to support itself at ground level. So she said that is the biggest indicator of reprolapse post-surgery if it's not fixed.
Okay.
So again, this wasn't something we were expecting. She said, so then what I had to do was very carefully cut open your perineum and find all of the 4 individual muscles that are there and tighten and repair those 4 individual muscles before I sewed your perineum back together. And I asked her also to repair my what's the hymen tag? Yeah. That I wish I have had stitches for back at my first birth, but my independent midwife who was at the birth with me actually overrode my value system with her value system and told me and the staff there that I didn't need stitches and that I was fine with whatever my vagina was afterwards. Turns out that's not actually true.
No, turns out you actually have your own wishes.
Yes. So I asked her to repair this tongue that hangs out of my vagina. I don't want it anymore. If I'm having all of this done, I'd rather have the gold standard, Rolls Royce
vagina,
fucking Bentley vagina pelvis. You give it to me, girlfriend. I'm ready.
You're already in there too. Like, why not?
I am ready. I have done the work with the Corolla of a vagina. I am ready for the Bentley. Upgrade me. Right?
I love it.
So this surgery went for twice as long, which they weren't prepared for. So by the time I come out of surgery, it's now like 7:30 at night. So, and I was so drowsy, I couldn't even like really keep my eyes open to talk to Nick, who had come to see me afterwards. So he left. But that was the longest fucking night of my life. I kept like dozing off into this like drug-induced coma of a sleep, thinking I'd slept for hours. Wake up, it had been like 15 minutes.
Oh gosh. Oh, that's the worst.
It was fucking awful. And the hospital staff, as is the case post-COVID, are incredibly under pressure. So there were never enough nurses. It wouldn't matter whether it was day or night, because they were running on ratios, patient to nurse ratios, that were unsustainable.
Yeah, wow.
And the level of different information you get is pretty fucked. So, I really needed a heat pack on this spot on my like butt, on my left butt cheek. There's this spot internally where they attach the vaginal vault to the ligaments that sit higher up in the pelvis. So it kind of feels like it's at the back of your butt. And that's what was really sore. But the hospital wouldn't give me heat packs because they were saying they would increase inflammation. And they wouldn't give me ice packs because my ovaries actually were a bit achy. because I kept my ovaries.
Mm.
So ice pack over my ovaries felt amazing, but I was only allowed one because if I had too many, I'd probably burn my skin.
Mm.
So that was all a bit shit. And I wish that I had, by the time I spoke to my surgeon about it, she was like, well, that's all bullshit. Let's just get you what you need. And, you know, she just led me through the hospital. Like, let's do it like this. You know, I just like fucking loved it. I was like, needed you 48 hours ago.
Yeah.
But you didn't know these things either. So this is why I'm writing all of this in my blog.
Like
so
you didn't know how
that
to advocate yourself beyond.
No, yes. So all of that, wish I had that. So I'm on their opioids, you know, press the button of pain relief thinking, well, if I can just like sleep through the night, I'll be better. But the opioids then made me nauseous and vomiting.
Mm.
And when you've just had all of this, my pelvis is full of stitches, vomiting is horrendous.
Oh, God. Oh,
and feeling nauseous is horrendous.
Wow.
And then the tube they put down your throat, obviously from being in general, that actually leaves your throat really scratchy, which I wasn't prepared for. So I kept wanting to cough, and coughing hurts.
Mm.
So these are all things I wasn't prepared for and didn't know. So here comes the surrender.
Yeah.
Is in my head with my childhood programming. I'm like, I will control the shit out of this situation and then I'll be fine. I've got everything I need. I'm informed. And well, of course, the truth is you can never be totally.
Mm.
You are always going to be walking in chaos that will ask you to surrender deeper in any rite of passage. But your ego will tell you can prepare so much and so thoroughly that you won't enter that pain.
Mm.
Not true, of course. I mean, of course. And so here I am walking through this part and on my own because Nick's home running house, home and kids.
Mm.
So I'm on my own in this process, really navigating myself through, do I want to be on my own? Can I do this on my own? Do I want to be rescued? No, I don't want to be rescued, but like it was this real tussle.
Yeah.
And then they take the catheter out the next morning and I go to try and what they call a void, which is to have a wee, and nothing. I could feel my bladder getting full and I could not get it to come out. And that was for me horrific. So this is called urinary retention, which I knew nothing about. Turns out it's exceptionally common. The only reason I know that is through the stories of women, simply by me showing up with vulnerability, going, this is an experience I'm having, getting a flood of messages and stories from other women with their experiences of urinary retention, which I knew nothing about.
Mm.
I think had I known about this, just known about it, this would have been easier for me to process. But this came out of left field for me and I felt completely swamped by it.
That would have been pretty like scary to have that feeling of like, I know I need to wee.
Yeah, like your bladder bursting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Horrendous feeling. The feeling of my bladder screaming at me was worse than the pain in my left butt cheek.
Mm.
And of my reconstructed 1,000 stitches, who knows how many I have, the pain of my bladder screaming at me. And then I'm in this backwards and forwards with the nursing staff going, no, I need a catheter. I need to get this out of me. And then going, just keep trying.
Oh, God.
And then, you know, I have my mum, it's so perfect. My mum ring me just to check in how I'm going because she's so plugged into this experience because she had a hysterectomy and weeing was a really hard spot for her. So she's like, it's just mind over matter. It's just, you've just got to tell your mind to do it. And I wanted to yell down the phone, fuck you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like, I'm working pretty hard here. It hurts to sit on a toilet too, because it's the first time I'm moving my body. So my vagina is bleeding, like I'm dripping with blood just from sitting on the toilet because it opens your pelvis so much. So you got all these stitches. Like the whole thing is a bit awful.
Yeah.
And I can't wait. So in the end, I'm like, and I also want to say though, I mean, the nurses was stretched as well. And in the end, I ended up demanding, I'm like, I need you to ring my surgeon. This is it. I need you to ring them. And I didn't realize actually, because I was in this flurry, I hadn't been looking at my phone, but my surgeon had actually been ringing my phone. Had I looked at that, I probably could have bypassed a lot of this, but I didn't even look at my phone because I was in this experience.
Yeah.
And so in the end, the hospital staff get onto the nurse, onto my surgeon, and they decide that they're going to do a catheter. But the nursing staff do the catheter. And that was actually a little horrific because by then I've got a pelvis even sorer because I've been trying to move and sit on a toilet with it. I've got this bladder that is screaming with pain and I'm supposed to relax, and all of my physiology has changed. So my urethra I used to see incredibly clearly because it kind of stuck out of my vagina, easy to get a catheter into something you can see. This nurse almost perceived to me could not see my urethra. So I was like, wow, my vagina's really changed. It's a little exciting. My urethra is now probably exactly where it needs to be. I don't know my body as that for 17 years.
Amazing.
But it was awful because, you know, everything's swollen, inflamed. I'm kind of writhing and she keeps going, just relax. And I'm like, I can't fucking relax.
The worst thing.
What do you want me to do here? So it was actually the worst catheter experience because she really struggled to get it in and it was awful. But then the relief afterwards was incredible. So we decide we're going to leave it in for the rest of that day. I get to have a rest in bed and that night. And then the next day we'll take it out again and try again. And at that point, my surgeon would be there, which is the weekend. So I also know she's coming in on the weekend. And so we do that. I try again. Nothing. I can feel my bladder and I can feel the start of a tingle. And then it's like it evaporates like steam. I can't follow it. I can't track it. It's not working. You know, and we're doing all the things, trying the water, trying the tap, you know, putting water onto my urethra. Like we're doing all of the fucking things, walking around, moving, relaxing, breathing, all of it. Nothing is where it's just stopped. So then I was in a huge amount of shock because I'm then there going, fuck, I know unless I can wee, I can't go home. So I'm in hospital until I can wee. I didn't in my head know that they did home catheterization. So my fear is I've got to stay here and I want to get the fuck out of here. I just want to be home. I don't want to be in the hospital where sleeping is horrific. I don't want to be here and the food is gross. I don't want to be here anymore. But this won't work. I've got to stay here. So I'm meeting all of these fear edges. Anyway, this beautiful surgeon, she came in on her weekend. She sat with me for probably an hour and a half and just so beautifully, I mean, this is where all of my perceptions of surgeons go out the window, held space. She was like, it's going to be fine. And I'd be like, yeah, but I'm really fucking scared. She's like, yeah, and it's really scary.
Oh my God, it's amazing.
I know. And I'd be like, you know, this is really shit. She's like, it's also really fine. But yeah, it's really shit. And she'd just wait for me to do the next thing. It was fucking unbelievable.
Because it doesn't compute with surgeons like in your head around like how on the time is money.
No,
like
it's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. So, you know, she kind of sits with me and she just has such faith in my body. And she was so compassionate. She was like, look, I mean, you poor love of a bladder. I mean, I've like hoiked her out of your vagina and moved her up over here and your urethra's done this and you've got a pelvis full of stitches. Like, poor love. It's okay that she's had a shock.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why the fuck isn't my body working? And she's like, oh, because she's had a lot. It's okay.
So beautiful.
Like, it's amazing, right?
Because you're being the hard ass, like trying to control this body.
Yeah.
It's just the gentle.
Yeah. It's so much faith in my body. It'll come back. It just needs a minute. Just needs a minute to rest. Just needs a minute to relax. Just needs a minute to, you know, get rid of the shock. To come back, to get used to where it is now. You've just moved its home. It's okay that it goes offline for a hot little minute. It will come back. Like she was so, and I'm like, you know, can't let it go. And she's like, do you need a Valium? I was like, I don't need a fucking Valium. This is, you know, my body is not working. And she's like, you know, I've sat with you a lot this year. I've never seen you like this before. This seems a little extraordinary, the anxiety that you have here. Maybe we could have a little Valium. And I'm like, no, I can't. No, because in my head, I've just got my mother-in-law who'll pop a Valium, you know, just to get through my wedding. I'm like, oh, no. I'm not
going to be her. I am not that.
I'm not the 1960s housewife. No, I'm not just popping Valium. And she's like, no, I'm going to give you the tiniest dose just to relax your urethra. That's all it is, just to relax your pelvic floor a little because there's a lot of tension going on here.
Mm.
I was like, okay. She's like, and here's how the home one will work. You don't have to stay here. Here's what we can do. And she walked me through the whole thing. And she said, and I can do the catheter, or we can get the nurses to do the catheter. And I was like, not getting the nurse to do the catheter. It was a fucking hideous experience. And she was like, oh God, because actually having a catheter done should never hurt.
Oh.
So she is very strong on, when you're as expert as she is, obviously she's a urinary
Surgeon.
gynecological surgeon. Yeah. When you're as expert as her and as familiar with the structures as she is, it should not hurt. And it doesn't when she does it.
Wow.
Don't even feel it.
Mm.
So, she came in on that first day when I had the hospital catheter in and I'm in rest mode, just to do that psychological stuff with me. Then she left me to process and decide the next day, Sunday. And I asked her, the surgeon, to come back in on her weekend off on a Sunday just to do my catheter, because I didn't want the nurses to do it, like an obstetrician.
Mm.
And she 100% did.
That's amazing.
Isn't that amazing?
Mm.
And even as she came in, she realized that the nurse that was in the room was the one who'd done my awful catheter. And she looked at me, she went, like this. And so then she moved into instructions with the nurse on how she would do it. And I was like, amazing. Amazing.
So that nurse got to then learn.
I don't think the nurse wanted to listen to her, but yes, there's a hierarchy still present. So the nurse just acknowledged, yes, okay, sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she then set me up for home catheterization, and then we began the process of being able to go home. So the shock of not having a urethra, of not having being able to wee, and my body not working, and having a permanent catheter, which is actually awful because it's in your vagina. So I can't sit upright because I can't sit at a dining table. I can't sit up to have dinner.
Mm.
I can't sit upright on a couch. I always have to be in this lean back because I have a fucking tube coming out of my vagina.
Mm.
Every time I move or the tube wiggles, my vagina is being wiggled, which is incredibly irritating.
You've got this constant stimulation going on.
Right. And what I find ironic about the entire situation is my two biggest fears going in, where I'll end up incontinent, where I can't stop weeing, and I'll end up with a numb vagina. Well, guess what I've got? I can't wee to the point where there's no wee. And I have a constantly stimulated vagina to the fact where I don't remotely hold the belief that my vagina is numb.
And that you feel it all of the time instead of knowing how to connect to it.
Right.
And the other irony being too, that your go-to is to control and to do everything. Yes. And guess who can't do everything?
Can't do it. I have wee attached to my leg and a catheter. I'm literally have to lie down and be still. Which of course is genius, and it's for 10 days in the end.
And for you, I mean, because my concern for you was that you were not going to
I'll just get up and do shit. No, I know,
because you fuck this up, you're pretty fucked, right? Like if you don't let this healing happen.
It's true.
And so as much as the catheter is uncomfortable and painful, is it a form of chaining you to rest?
100%, right? My whole processing around this has been looking at the fears I'm holding that it'll never work again, or blah, 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 blah. And also trying to love where I'm at. Being part of that process is loving the catheter for what it brings me, loving how this is the perfect antidote to the fears that I held going in. But this is surrender. This is surrender to being a really messy human in this process who's bouncing between fear and belief and fear and belief and fear and belief and fear and faith. And allowing space for the messiness, allowing space for the surprises. And of course, a rite of passage will always take us back to core fears, right? Or core wounds, which fuel our value system and our purpose that drives our entire life. So anytime I go through a rite of passage, I will ultimately end up with some version of my vagina being involved, because one of my original wounds is, of course, sexuality. So here I have something that involves my vagina, where I don't have control over my body and what it does. And I have to let go. I can't do anything.
You don't also have control of what's being done to
you. Yeah. So it's hello, core void. And I think we forget that part of the humanness of this soul journey of purpose is that we will always return to it. So I've really been sitting in the fact that I thought I could evolve beyond almost. But truly, my realization is anytime I go through a huge transition change rite of passage, my core voids will get re-stimulated for the purpose of driving new wisdom and purpose and evolution of that purpose.
And so with that knowledge, how does that help you hold yourself more gently and with more trust right now?
Well, I mean, I think you just spelt it out. That's what it does for me. It allows me to hold myself more gently, more compassionately. It allows me to, as I want to speed up, remind myself how to slow down and be here. And it gives me more faith that this isn't my body not working and never working again. This is an experience wired and constructed for me. And my only role is to be here walking the path right now and right now and right now. And that's what I have done in every part of this particular point in the journey, is just reminded myself anytime I've noticed my psyche going forwards is consciously bringing myself and back and going, okay, can you do right now? Particularly when I was in that heightened fear state in the hospital and I was running ahead with what this meant for the rest of my life / recovery / getting out of hospital. Anytime I noticed myself doing that, I just had to come back and like being like, I can't fucking do that. I can't live like this. I can't, bringing it back to, can you live this moment right now? Yes, I can. Every time. Yes, I can. I can live this moment right now.
And then the more that you're building a belief of I can live this moment, and you reaffirm that over and over and over again, that adds up to the belief that you can live the next moment.
Exactly. And it's a function of our psyche and our trauma patterns to do the forward motion. But so that, I think, is a huge strategy, is being able to go, fucking stop doing that. Come back. Can you live this moment? Can you make a choice right now? Yes, I can. So therefore, I know at every moment, whatever this journey is, whether my urethra comes back online on Tuesday or not, when I get this catheter out and we have a trial void, whether it's working by then or not, can I live this one next moment? Yes, I can, because I have lived it so many times. I have evidence. I have had a broken body so many times and it's come back to me. I have evidence. I have had a body that I have felt disconnected to, or that's done things or had things done to it that I haven't been privy to. And I have come back to it it's come back to me every single time. So I have evidence of my body doing this that it's doing now, and me still coming back to the greatest alignment and experience that I can have. So I have the evidence. Where is your evidence? So it's been a really deep process of letting go and fear. Yesterday I realized, the last couple of days I thought, what does it mean to me? So not being able to to me means holding on, not being able to let go. And I recognize there's this part of me, this cord or thread, the practitioner part of me, who was really struggling to let go of her uterus, because who is she as a woman who works with women and their wombs if she herself does not have one?
Yeah.
It's a big fear for me as a practitioner who's always had a womb, been womb-centric and worked with wombs.
And on that point, how beautiful is it that you called in a practitioner friend,
exactly,
who's also
exactly the same, and sat there and said to me, I had exactly the same fear and I went through exactly the same process. How could I possibly work with women's wombs and fertility and getting them pregnant when I had just gotten rid of my uterus? Perfect. The universe will always provide what you need. You just have to ask the question. I asked the question the day before. She arrived the day after.
Amazing.
So I had my session with her. And then I had been creating a cross. So one of my beautiful friends who'd also come over and is intuitive and psychic, and I'd said, I'm going through this. And she said to me, I really feel like you're holding on. She just echoed what I'd said. And then she said, I feel like this catheter that's coming out of you is like the umbilical cord, and like your uterus is like one of your kids. If your kids were to die, how could you possibly move forwards? And I was like, totally is. even the symbology of it, right? Like the catheter tube is literally like having a cord.
Yes.
So I had that awareness, and she said, you know what? I looked at this painted cross that I had in my house the other day, and I literally thought that's going to need to go to someone soon. She said, it's you. Why don't you do a funeral for your uterus? Why don't you thank it, put your kids' names and birth dates and all the things on it, and put on the date that it died?
Oh, that's beautiful.
And I was like, yes, that's what I want to do. So she just left this cross at my door. It was beautiful, painted cross. And I had been working on that for the 24 hours before I saw Kirsten. And I had got my kids to all put their handprints on the back. I didn't hide it from them. I haven't hid any part of this from my kids. Like, what are you doing? So I'm having a funeral for my uterus because I've realized. And they were all like, okay, cool. We don't need to make it a big thing. Kids, I think we underestimate continuously how conscious Gen Z is.
Yeah.
They didn't even make it a big thing. They were like, yeah, cool. Gwen sat there and decorated next to me on the couch for, I don't know, an hour and a half. Happy. I sat there and drew more things and painted, drew. I really felt like there was lineage stuff here for me. So I wrote about my lineage, and I wrote the death date of my uterus, and I wrote the words that this process represented to me as a funeral, restoring faith and surrender and healing and love. And I wanted to be so grateful for all of the life that my uterus had brought me. Like, I'm so grateful. And you get to return now. This sense of, I haven't gotten rid of this piece of me, just like a loved one. It's been part of me physically, and now I build a different relationship. You move to an etheric state, but I don't lose you, and I don't lose your wisdom. Like that whole idea of this returning to consciousness and returning to source. And one of my other beautiful friends had messaged me and said, I just did breath work, and I had this, visualization moment, she said, where you handed me your womb, and I dug a hole with my hands in the earth, in Mother Earth, and I put your uterus in it, and I covered it over, and instantly wildflowers sprung up. And so I had that piece of information that in my head felt so true, is that we forget that the body came from and will return to the earth. And who are we to say that there's a way in which that happens, or how that should be, or what is right or wrong? There's a returning to that which created. So I really strongly was holding on to this sense of letting it be cyclical, and letting it be like the relationship that I have with my father in the spirit world, I think is a better relationship than I ever had with him in the 3D world. So how do I let my uterus do that same transition, rather than trying to hold her physically here?
And how does that, playing into your other fear around cervical orgasm and losing your cervix, is how does that building of the connection to your uterus in the etheric world help you build that energetic connection to your cervix in that world?
Oh, true. I actually hadn't thought of that, but I hope so. I mean, I have no evidence for that yet. I don't know any of that yet. I hope so.
I just wonder.
Yeah. So yesterday I actually had a funeral for my uterus in my own little private way, with my grandmother elm tree, who I return to over and over and over for all manner of ceremony. So the deeper letting go that will be required of you as you walk the rite of incorporation, you can never be prepared for. Surrender is not something you can prepare for. It's only something you can meet moment by moment. So it's both preparation for empowerment, and knowing that you cannot escape your humanness, and your soul will ask you to let go of your ego, your identity, and your form in order to become something greater.
Oh, I'm not saying much because I'm just like enraptured by this conversation. Yeah, it's really beautiful.
So that's all I have. That's all I want to bring here. And then obviously follow it up with, so I'm writing all of the blogs on here's what I learned, how to create a great care package, here's what I didn't know, like all of the things that I want to put out into the world so that women may have a path to follow that I did not have. I mean, like you and I say, Bridget, we created this podcast because it's everything we wanted but didn't have back then when we were going through the beginnings of motherhood.
Yeah.
Same thing here. For women who are doing vaginal prolapse, who are having a hard time with their periods and their fertility, for women who are ready to perhaps have a hysterectomy or vaginal prolapse repair surgery and don't know how to reconcile those pieces of their identity. So you can find out all about that on my website. There's going to be all the blogs. And of course, if you're ready to create your own rite of passage process and you want to do that in a fun, humorous, crude, outlandish, but incredibly intentional way, then you can download my hysterectomy kit and you can, instead of hysterectomy, apply anything, vaginal prolapse, whatever it is that you're going through. And you can find out more about that at julietenner.love/hysterectomy. And Bridgie, what have you got going on?
So what I have going on is the free guide that you can get is your Christmas survival guide. So we talked about this quite a bit in last week's episode, and it is really me holding you through December so that you can experience a Christmas that you desire, a little more free of the ways in which you have bound yourself to challenge, to overwhelm, to scarcity, so that you can have the Christmas that you really intend to have. So find out more about that at bridgetwood.life/Christmas guide.
Perfect. And we're Nourishing Mother. We would love to hear, of course, the ripples of any of our conversations for you and yourself, your psyche, your emotions, your questions. We love them. So please reach out to us on the socials or on our individual pages or emails, and we would love to continue the conversation with you.
Remember to nourish the woman to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively into your life, then head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.